This summer, serve up the Cookout Classics, Heinz Ketchup, and Kraft Singles. Every good burger needs a layer of perfectly melty cheese and thick, rich ketchup. We all know it's not a cookout without Heinz and Kraft.
Some things happen fast, like a vacuum finding your lost earring. A dog reacting to the word walk. And settling up with friends on the PayPal app. Send and receive money in seconds. Access your balance to send, shop, pay bills, and more. Download the PayPal app to get started. An account with PayPal is required to send and receive money. A PayPal balance account is required to hold and use a balance.
Blowing ad budget on metrics that look great till the CFO sees them, that's bull spend. And marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
I remember telling my boss, it'll be good for the brand, when leads were slow. Yeah, it wasn't.
Cut the bull spend. LinkedIn lets you target by company, job title, and more. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Belarus are back in the Olympics and world sport, but the Russians remain banned for now due to drugs, not war. But for how long? I'm John.
And I'm Michael, and this is Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic sport podcast, where we talk about the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games all the time, not just once every 4 years.
We've the latest from the IOC on the changing stance of the war on Ukraine.
Neutrality and our remit is sport, right? And we've got to figure out what does that mean? And I think we're doing that.
Plus, we've got some updates for you on the Winter Olympics in the French Alps in just under 4 years' time, and why there won't be as many sports in the Summer Games in Brisbane in 2032.
We'll round up the rest of the news from the Games, from the Commonwealths in Glasgow to the European Athletics Championships in Birmingham.
And could London or the UK stage another Olympic Games in the 2040s? That's what they're saying.
It should be spread more fairly and evenly because it's such a special thing to experience, so we can't be too greedy, right?
This is Anything But Footy. Download, listen and follow. We are gearing up for Glasgow and looking ahead to LA. Belarus are back in the Olympic fold, back in the Olympic movement, back in world sport, if you like. After being banned since 2022, the International Olympic Committee Executive Board has voted that the participation of Belarusian athletes, including teams, in competitions governed by international federations and international sports events organisers, should be lifted. That is the big headline after the latest meeting that took place this week of the IOC-EB, the Executive Board, and it reaffirms their stance. Athletes' participation in international sport should not be limited by the actions of their governments, it said in a statement, including involvement in a war or conflict. Now, the Olympics says the National Olympic Committee of Belarus is in good standing and complies with the Olympic Charter. Qualifying for the LA Games starts this summer, so they have returned, despite, of course, their support for Russia and the war in Ukraine. I mentioned Russia. The Russians are not back. They are not back. They remain banned due to concerns from WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, about their drugs system. Here's the IOC president, Kirsty Coventry.
Neutrality and our remit is sport, right? And we've got to figure out what does that mean? And I think we're doing that. And I think you can all see that we're doing it. And we made it very clear that we want all athletes to be able to participate. And so this decision, I believe, and the executive board believes, shows that. When it comes to the Russian Olympic Committee, there has been some very constructive exchanges. But the difference, the Belarusian National Olympic Committee was never suspended. And they've always been in good standing. The Russian Olympic Committee is still suspended. In 2016, I was still an athlete, and it is huge importance for me to do whatever we can to ensure that the field of play, whenever any athletes are coming back to competition, it is the cleanest and fairest field of play that we can provide. So we will work with WADA, and WADA have ensured us that they will keep us in the loop of anything that may come up. But there right now is no timeline to that.
So Kirsty Coventry revealing that the Russians are still, and there's uncertainty about what is going on with their anti-doping system, so they remain banned. And she reiterated that they broke the Olympic Charter, which is another reason why they remain banned. Now, the statement is pretty clear, Michael. The IOC navigating the ever increasing complex realities and consequences of the current geopolitical context. That's what they say. In other words, they're looking at the rising number of wars and conflicts with what's going on in the Middle East, with the United States, who are the next hosts in LA, with Israel, with Iran, and they're looking at this and going, well, Belarus and Russia, well, we need to work out what we're doing. And they've been pretty firm that Belarus are back, but the Russians are not, but because of the drugs.
Yeah, to put it kind of simply, war is okay, drugs not, as far as the IOC. And to simplify even more from what their statement said, basically, is they, by doing this, by making this decision, they give themselves a solution to a problem. And the problem is the USA. What do they do about the USA, who, as you say, are hosting? They've got LA, they've got hosting in Salt Lake City coming up as well. They've been involved in these incidents, in these conflicts, in these wars. Venezuela springs to mind, Iran springs to mind, also the wider picture in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine as well. If they kept that firm stance on Belarus, they would then have to look at all those other countries that I just mentioned. They don't have the appetite for that. What they do have the appetite to do is keep Russia out, and their excuse, if you like, for that, or their reasoning behind that, is because of what they did in Sochi with the systematic doping that they did there. So from their point of view, they can keep Russia out on that basis, but they can allow all those other countries and their athletes, and importantly, they always do so, they put the athletes at the centre, they can allow all of those other athletes back into the games.
Yeah, you talk about the athletes, Kirsty Coventry saying, I was an athlete in 2016 and it was a mess. The whole decision about the drugs and before Rio and the Russians was a total mess. So that's why she has stood by what WADA are saying and their concerns. Now, you said, to put it really simply, which I thought summed it up brilliantly, how I would do it is the IOC can control what goes on in sport, which they control anti-doping. They can't control what's going on in the world, which is war. So they're just sticking with sport, and they're saying sport is our priority, athletes are our priority, and everyone should be allowed to compete.
Lots of other headlines from this IOC Executive Board meeting before their full meeting, which is in June. There'll be no summer sport disciplines on the sports programme for the French Alps 2030 Olympic Winter Games. We had talked about whether there might be the opportunity to have like cyclocross or cross-country athletics, or even moving some of the kind of summer arena sports into the Winter Games to give them a little bit more parity. But the IOC President, Kirsty Coventry, has confirmed 2030 French Alps only sports on snow and ice.
Yes, but we expect them, of course, maybe, as you said, with Salt Lake City 4 years on after that. That will be some of the announcements that will happen in June. Now, talking of 2030, the process for the Youth Olympics has been paused. The IOC says it needs to develop a youth strategy. It doesn't know what the purpose of the Youth Olympics is, who benefits from it, who watches it, what's it for. So they've come out and said, we are stopping the process. We are pausing the process for bids for the 2030 Youth Olympics. However, in typical IOC fashion, they are saying the Dakar Games this summer and the 2028 Games in Italy will go ahead and will be supported as planned. But not great if you've got a Youth Olympics coming up. The IOC say they just don't really know what it's for.
Yeah, I also just think they're probably feeling the financial squeeze. The IOC, everybody is feeling the financial squeeze. They will not be immune to that. And maybe this is just a halt, I think, for those expansion plans that have been very much the IOC's sort of brainchild, if you like, over the past few years.
And of course, we know, Michael, that sportsmen and women can compete at the age of 16. As you're about to tell us about a new event that we saw just before the Paris Games, and they've reinvented it for LA. That why do we need Youth Olympics for teenagers when actually they can compete in sports in the Olympics?
Yeah, I'm talking of some of those sports. 4 hosts have been confirmed for the 2028 Olympics Q Series, so formerly called the qualifying series. I think they're now kind of formalising this into a series of kind of mini Olympic events leading into the LA Games. So they've confirmed Tokyo, Shanghai, Montreal and Orlando, May to June 2028. So fairly late on, I would say, in the qualification process. They're going to have 6 sports involved in this Q Series. So 3x3 basketball, beach volleyball, BMX freestyle, flag football, new sport, of course, sport climbing and skateboarding. And Kirsty Coventry says it sets a great platform and road to the LA 28 Olympic Games, which start a month later on the 14th of July. We've already got it ringed in our calendar.
We certainly have. And there are lots of sports at LA, 36 in total. You mentioned one of the new ones, flag football. Kirsty Coventry also confirming that they're not expecting that number for Brisbane in 2032. As you say, costs and various other issues. They will be deciding what sports will be in Brisbane by the end of the year or early 2027. Again, they can't give us a definitive answer, but they will be telling us by the end of the year or early next year.
Yeah, that could be bad news for netball, of course, who have been trying to get themselves into the Olympic Games, and Australia would seem like a natural fit for that. Whether we're going to see something like flag football in Brisbane, I'm not too sure. We've also heard this week from the IOC discussions about the issue with ice hockey at the French Alps 2030 Winter Games. So this is Groundhog Day, isn't it? Another issue about ice hockey ahead of the Winter Games. Now, the Nice mayor has said the plan to convert the football stadium to an ice hockey arena isn't supported. So discussions are now in place whether to move the Paris or the Lyon games, which already has 10,000-seater stadiums, move the ice hockey to Paris or Lyon, where they could stage the games as well. So, yeah, once again, and I think this might be one of the reasons why they're not expanding the 2030 Winter Games. We've been told that they are a little bit behind with their preparations, and this is another example of that.
I'd love to go to Paris to watch ice hockey, so I wouldn't have an issue with that if we could jump on the Eurostar and get there instead of going all the way down to the south of France. But we will see. As you say, these events, the cost and what is needed to put on these sports and stage these events is really causing an issue. Now, I know you're concerned about my LA ticket situation.
Keeps me awake at night, to be honest.
I'm sure it does. I can confirm, though, that the Cushing family, the Cushing clan, are in the ballot again for the second set of tickets. I won't be holding my breath, but we are hoping to be there.
Hi, John. The LA 28 Olympic ticket draw for Drop 2 to purchase official LA 28 tickets is open. Since you registered for Drop 1, you've automatically been entered. Drop 2 will be in August with refreshed inventory across all Olympic sports. The LA 28 ticketing team.
So there you go. The Americans have said we're in the boat automatically. If you didn't get into the first ballot, you automatically get into the second ballot, which will be in July. So fingers crossed. Although, as I've said on a previous podcast, a few of my friends were like, "Whoa, that's too expensive. We ain't going there." Now, in other news from the Games, the Glasgow 2026 Commonwealth Games medals have been revealed at the world-famous Glasgow School of Art. The first ever inclusive design, inspired by Glasgow's iconic landmarks and coat of arms, includes braille and tactile elements. 215 gold medals will be awarded across 10 sports, of course, this summer, 6 para sports as well, as the Games return to Glasgow July 23rd to August 2nd.
Now, my perfect British sporting springtime saw a couple of world records at the London Marathon. Sebastian Coe marked himself out in distance running history by becoming the first person ever to run an official marathon. So that was one not under control conditions. He did it in under 2 hours, 1 hour, 59 minutes, 30 seconds at the London Marathon this year as well. There were also wins at a world record in the women's race for Tigis Assefa and in those wheelchair races for Marcel Hug, who's now won 8 London marathons in total, which equals the record set by David Weir. And I had a quick chat with Marcel afterwards, and I told him that, and I think he already knew it, but I think to hear it, to say, look, you've won 8, which is the same as David Weir, he got quite emotional, tears in his eyes for it. And also I should mention as well his fellow Swiss wheelchair athlete Catherine de Bruyne, who missed the world records by a couple of seconds in London last year, won the London Marathon. Another brilliant day in London. The sun was shining for it. Record amounts, we're hearing, I think 1.3 million people have applied in the ballot for next year. And I mean, as I had the opportunity to stand there at the finish line, quite some time after Sebastian Sawe and the others, watching those that were finishing in 6, maybe 7 hours in some cases. I can't imagine why you'd want to put yourself through that, but clearly 1 in 60 people in this country do.
And you were there for the moment that, as you say, under 2 hours. I mean, this is a Roger Bannister moment. This is a 4-minute mile moment, isn't it? And you were there on that finish line.
Yeah, and do you know what was remarkable about it was it seemed to catch some people, including the broadcasters, by surprise, because it became clear for those of us that were there at the finish line. We had the benefit of some monitors and some graphics, and it became clear to us that 6-7 miles out that this was on. They make projections, if you like, based on mile times, and at 18 miles they were making projections that we were going to see this sub 2 hour marathon, and it would have meant a huge blow up from Sebastian Sawe not to have got very, very close. And yet for some people it was pretty much until he came past Buckingham Palace and up the Mall that they realized that we could actually be witnessing one of those history-making moments, the sort of moment that, whether it was Usain Bolt's 100 meters world record or whether it was, like you say there, the 4-minute mile, it's got to be talked about in those kind of conversations. The first sub 2 hour marathon, not with the controlled conditions. Obviously, the technology with the shoes, with Sebastian Sawe was a conversation afterwards. But, sport, as we've always said, evolves. Technology evolves. Kit's always evolving. That's why we don't run on cinder tracks in Plimsolls anymore. So I accept that. And that is the way of the world, if you like, in elite sport. But it was, remarkable, absolutely remarkable to see not just Tigst Assefa break the world record, but then obviously what Sawe did as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk about evolving. Your springtime sport continued, and snooker's evolving into a worldwide sport.
Yeah, we've got our second in 2 years world snooker champion from China. Now, this time it was 22-year-old Wu Yize who won at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield. Again, was lucky enough to be there. Saw him beat the former champion, Sean Murphy, who incidentally was looking to try and retain that title or win back that title that he previously won 21 years ago. So, I mean, that is absolutely remarkable. Shows the longevity of Sean Murphy, who won it, incidentally, as a 22-year-old as well. Only Stephen Hendry has been younger in winning the title than Wu Yize. It went down to a deciding frame. It was an absolutely classic World Snooker Championship on Bank Holiday Monday. Did speak to Sean Murphy afterwards, who gave all his congratulations, of course, to Wu Yize, was clearly devastated as well. But it was another conversation, actually, that I had with Sean Murphy earlier on in the championships, which I just think is worth sharing now. And that is about, and we talked, haven't we, about the expansion of sports in the Olympics, whether Q Sports could be in the Olympics, because Q Sports are sort of on the IOC radar. They are an Olympic sport, but they're not in the Olympics. And in fact, Q Sports were part of the very first Paralympic Games as well, which a lot of people don't remember. So, I had a little chat with Sean Murphy, the runner-up in the World Snooker Championship, about his thoughts on Q Sports coming into the Games.
Our chairman, Jason, was with the Prime Minister in China a few weeks ago. Obviously, the Prime Minister has stepped in here and has his hand on the case here to help with the funding directly for the snooker to stay here in Sheffield. Wouldn't it be great if that opened the door to just a little bit of funding for the sport now? I can't make the point strongly enough. We've never had that. Snooker was one of the founding members of the Paralympic Games. We are a member of the Olympics, we're just not in it, and that's a nuance that not everyone understands. We've been such a flag bearer for the UK around the world for a long, long time without any help from government at all. It'd be lovely now if they saw something positive through their investment in snooker, that they thought, you know what, we might throw a few quid into snooker and see where it takes us, because you can see where it's taken other countries.
Would you like to represent Team GB at the Olympics?
I used to think so, yeah. I used to be a big flag bearer for snooker being in the Olympics. In fact, I fronted a bid. I went to Paris a few years ago and actually fronted the bid. I've since changed my mind. I actually don't think snooker should be in the Olympics, is my view now. I think this would always be the crowning moment for a snooker player, the World Championships. I think if Olympic gold isn't the pinnacle of your sport shouldn't be in. That's my view on it now. And no matter how many golds you threw out, the World Championships here would always be top dog.
What changed your mind?
A good friend of mine, Gail Ems, was on Fighting Talk on 5 Live again, and I remember listening to her, and this question came up directly to her, and she went bang. As an Olympic silver medalist and world champion, she gave her answer, and I remember thinking, geez, she's right. You know, if Olympic gold isn't the top of your tree, you shouldn't be in it. And as I say, the World Championships here at the Crucible will always be number one for snooker people.
So Sean Murphy talking to Michael, and I think darts has been mentioned as well, the ever-evolving world of darts coming into potentially the Olympics. And I think this is an issue. It goes back to how we started this conversation. Kirsty Coventry saying sport is getting bigger and bigger, but bigger doesn't necessarily mean better, does it?
I don't always subscribe to this. The Olympic Games has to be the pinnacle. There's nothing in the Olympic Charter. There's nothing in the values that say that. And I've always thought that the inclusion of sports like tennis and like golf, I've welcomed those. I certainly think the inclusion of the urban sports have revolutionized. I'm not sure that snooker needs to go into the games. I wouldn't call it a true global sport in the way that, say, tennis is or golf is, for example. It doesn't have that true global circuit. Yes, there are now players from many parts of the world. So we're getting South Americans. Increasingly, we're getting some Europeans, Germans. Luca Brissell from Belgium, a former world snooker champion who's now dropped out the 16, didn't make these world championships. Of course, the Far East as well. We've still got Neil Robertson for Australia. But I just don't see it as a global sport in the same way. Now, the argument you can make there is inclusion in the Olympics could improve that, but I don't think it would bring the best snooker players in the world to the Olympic Games. You would essentially have an Olympic snooker tournament if you wanted the best performers there, with 10 Chinese players, 1 Australian and 20 from Great Britain, and that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and that is where the issue comes, because, as we say, China and certainly Europeans dominate, as you say, but you can only have one player from each country, or two at the very most. I think if China was about to stage the next lot of Olympics, could be Winter Olympics, couldn't it? The snooker season goes over the winter. If they were about to stage them, like we've seen in the last 10 years, you could see snooker maybe coming into the sport, but we will see.
You look at that 32, there was obviously an Iranian in the draw, Hossein Fafai. There was a Polish player for the first time ever. Could snooker do something where they maybe have like a mixed doubles tournament potentially to do something a little bit different? I think there's a lot of work to be done before snooker, I think, is anywhere close to getting to the games.
This is Anything But Footy. Could the UK stage another Olympics in 2040? That is coming up. We're covering the Olympics and the Paralympics all the time. This is Anything But Footy. We'll talk about the London Marathon earlier. And staying with the marathon, some surprise news. Phil Sessamon has withdrawn from representing the Great British Northern Ireland team in the marathon for this summer's European Championships in Birmingham. It says in a statement, due to an unforeseen injury, we wish him well. Bit of a blow, though, ahead of those championships.
Quite surreal experience of sitting in Sheffield at the Crucible Theatre watching the snooker whilst double screening, watching the World Relays in Botswana, and a total of 5 British relay teams, including the new 4x100 metres, have qualified their spots at next year's World Athletics Championships, which are being held in Beijing. The mixed 4x4 relay team won bronze on the final day of that World Relays Championship in Botswana, and the men's 4x4 will have to qualify through times in the coming 12 months.
Yeah, the new mixed 4x1, certainly worth keeping an eye out on. Talking of which, Michael's favourite moment, big news from the Birmingham European Athletics Championships. The mascot has been revealed. Yes, it is Bab the Bull. I knew it would be a bull for Birmingham, as we saw from the Commonwealth Games, of course, a few years ago. But Bab the Bull has been unveiled, the official mascot of Birmingham 2026. Watch out for the selfies with Michael as the summer months continue.
That will not be happening. Aussie is still there, which was the big bull from the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games at New Street Station. So they've found a permanent home for Aussie, which is fantastic. Bit of para table tennis news for you. Silver medals for Will Bailey in the men's class 7 and Fliss Pickard in the women's class 6 were very much the highlights for the British para table tennis team at the World Para Challenger event in Slovenia.
That's our news from the Games. We always bring you a roundup of everything that's happening Olympic and Paralympic-wise. Now, talking of which, the UK government says it's in discussions about supporting potential bids for the Olympics and Paralympics in the 2040s. Sitting on the fence, literally, because the government says it wants to be a world leader in staging sports events, so another Games is on the list. They're talking about bringing the Ryder Cup back and the Solheim Cup as well. Now, last year, London Mayor Sadiq Khan said he wanted the city to bid for the 2040 Games, and we know Liverpool and Manchester are also keen to be considered in like a Northwest Olympics, as joint hosts in the future. And Michael has written various blogs on that you can check out on the website. Now, before we get into this, let's hear from double Olympic champion Victoria Pendleton, who, of course, won gold in Beijing and London in 2012 in the cycling. And she told us what she thinks.
Maybe it's not fair if we have the Olympics so soon after the last one. Think of all the other countries. Think of all the athletes missing out on an opportunity to perform in front of their home crowd. That is a once in a lifetime experience. And I'm not saying I want to deny younger GB athletes the opportunity to do that, but I think it should be spread more fairly and evenly because it's such a special thing to experience. So we can't be too greedy, right?
So that's Victoria Pendleton speaking to us, giving her thoughts on whether the UK should bid for another Olympic Games. If you want to hear more from Victoria Pendleton, she's our special guest, incidentally, on a new episode of Great British Bosses, which will be with you in a week's time. And a very special reason for that as well. So make sure you follow, download, keep listening to Anything But Footy to hear the full Victoria Pendleton story coming very soon. But let's talk about this UK bid. I mean, Victoria Pendleton, I kind of tend to agree with her. It's a bit too soon after London 2012. I said to you as well, London 2012 was so perfect in so many ways for me that actually I kind of just want to hold on to that memory. And I feel like if they did it again, it might not be quite so good. For me, the whole regeneration and legacy part of the project was absolutely fantastic. You couldn't just restage the Olympics in London. There would still be an enormous amount of things that would need to happen and possibly couldn't happen on the Olympic Park. I mean, the village is now apartments. People are living in those. There's areas of Parkland where the temporary water polo venue was, for argument's sake. You'd need to put the wings back on the aquatic centre, and you couldn't do that because there's walkways and parkways and woodlands and wetlands and everything there. So I'm not sure London is the solution. I do like the idea of exploring a north of England bid. Whether the IOC would like that, maybe the modern IOC would like that more than when Manchester bid for 96 and 2000. I mean, just going back to being in Sheffield, I mean, to drive to the Crucible Theatre, you've got loads of brilliant facilities, sporting facilities in Sheffield, all legacy events of the University Games, which get a bad rap because they cost a lot of money. Obviously, the Don Valley Stadium, which was part of that, subsequently been knocked down, which is a huge shame. But I think you've got a lot of purpose-built venues right across the north of England. And as you say, I blogged about this before when we were looking at potential solutions to the Commonwealth Games issue. So I don't think it would be hugely expensive. It will be hugely expensive. What am I talking about? But not as hugely as expensive as it could be, because I do think you do have from Newcastle in the northeast to Sheffield in South Yorkshire, from Hull in the east to Liverpool in the west, taking in Manchester and Leeds. You do have a lot of venues that are kind of ready to host various Olympic sports.
I tend to agree with you that I think it's too soon. I think it was 60 odd years from 48 to 2012 when London staged the Olympics. I also agree with you that I think the IOC may have changed its mind. Certainly during the late 90s and early noughties, it was about capital cities and making sure that it was in prime locations. And we know how difficult that is. And I think we've seen with LA getting it back, Brisbane is obviously not the capital of Australia, or not even Sydney, etc., etc. So I think, and what makes me really interested about the Liverpool-Manchester bid, and you mentioned Sheffield there, is you think about the clusters that happened in Milano Cortina. And I know it was the first time the Winter Olympics had done it. And I know the journalists moaned about it because they had to move around the country. I know you didn't moan about it, but other people did. And it took, in some cases, 7 or 8 hours to go from one cluster to another. And it makes it very difficult as one journalist to be able to cover all of the games. But I tell you what, it wouldn't take that long to go from Manchester to Liverpool, from Liverpool to Sheffield, even Sheffield to Newcastle. It's not going to be hours and hours. But you wonder whether actually across those areas could you come up with the clusters and make it feel like each of those cities was really benefiting, because there's a lot of hoo-ha in America at the moment that the World Cup, the Football World Cup that's about to happen, the host cities don't feel like they're going to get any benefit from it at all, because people are turning around going, well, this is too expensive, the tickets are ridiculous, no one wants to go to America anyway because of a lunatic who runs it, and various other things. But I wonder whether, could you do it where you have certain 4 or 5 sports in each of those 4 locations, and even throw Glasgow into the mix as well from what we're seeing with the Commonwealth Games. And actually, say in the 2050s, I mean, we're not going to be around by then, but 2040s for me, your issue is you've got Germany who are interested, you've got Hungary who are interested from a Budapest point of view, you've got India, you've got Saudi Arabia. There's so many people who want to stage the Olympics now because of the fact you don't have to do it in one location or have one Olympic park. I think we have to wait our turn and get it right for these cities, but we have to make sure that these cities benefit from it from the long term, as you say.
Yeah, 2 points on that. One, I think if you were to go with the North of England bid, maybe focused around Manchester and Liverpool with some sprinklings of those other areas, other cities. From a legacy point of view, the transport system, I think, could be vastly improved, and that would cut those journey times that you mentioned even further. That said, I mean, anyone that's watched the progress of HS2, which they can't seem to build between London and Birmingham, will wonder why.
Are they still building it?
They're still building it.
Yeah. When is it ever going to finish?
And they've scrapped HS3 and HS4 and all the others. So if the Olympic bid comes on, you've suddenly got a deadline where you need to have those high-speed train lines built and cross-country high-speed train lines. So I think there'd be some pushback on that. If we can't get HS2 done, then, how can we connect high-speed trains from Newcastle to Sheffield, from Hull to Liverpool? That's one point. The other point is, and as we record this, we are witnessing local election results coming in across much of the UK at the moment. If there is a change in Scotland with local elections there, and the SNP, for example, the Scottish Nationalist Party, get full control in Scotland, why would they not, as one of their opening gambits, suggest a Glasgow-Edinburgh Olympic bid? Edinburgh have hosted the Commonwealths in 1970 and 1986. They have some venues. Glasgow, as we know, 2014, a hugely successful games. They've picked up the baton, literally, and they're going to stage something in a short space of time this time around, which I think will be good but different. I think a Scotland bid for the Olympic Games, and you could send all those IOC members up to Gleneagles and they would enjoy the hospitality in Edinburgh and everything that comes with it. I think Scotland, if their government wanted to make a bit of a splash, should go alone on a bid, a Glasgow-Edinburgh bid. I think would be pretty compelling. What's really interesting about this statement, because let's be honest, it's not really news. It was obviously an interview, and someone sort of said, we're keeping an eye on it. But what the phrase they used was discussions about supporting potential bids. In other words, the UK government ain't going to do it. It doesn't want to do it, but if you've got Andy Burnham in Manchester, you've got the SNP up in Scotland, and even Sadiq Khan in London, and they all want to have it, and they all want to try and go for it, then the government will look at and support those. And then, you'd have a runoff, wouldn't you? Let's see which one we want as a country and vote for that. Like they do with Germany, they have votes about whether people want to back it and all that kind of thing. So I think that would work. So those are the 3 areas. That's what we're saying. We're saying potentially London, Glasgow or Edinburgh, or the Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Newcastle, the North bid. As well. 2040, though, I think is optimistic. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. You can always find out more about what we are doing by checking out our socials, Anything But Footy. You can get in touch with us on our website, anythingbutfooty.com. Listen to our special Olympic, Paralympic music playlist on Spotify. This is Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic sport podcast. We're gearing up for Glasgow and looking ahead to LA.